If you're wondering if God of War is for you and your family, sit back, relax, enjoy a quick digest of why it's a mature, beautiful game with an exceptional story and should be on every father and child's playlist. At the right age, of course. So as we go through this review, do me a favor and think about if you're ready to play God of War 2. God of War sets up its sequel extremely well through the story and the narrative, and it leaves one of the best cliffhangers without it actually being a terrible, clickbait style cliffhanger.
What you waiting for? Come on already! Let's go!
If you haven't tried the previous entries in God of War franchise, it's been a long time PlayStation exclusive hack and slash action adventure game, but it's slightly reinvented with the 2018 release of God of War. Previous releases of the game were from a sidelong view of Kratos as he moved through the stories, which were a little more than an excuse to move from one region to another, delivering epic combos and power moves, and combating interesting bosses with unique mechanics. Nothing wrong with that at all. They were quite enjoyable. God of War shifted to an over-the-shoulder third-person view that followed Kratos much more closely, providing a much more intimate experience through the Norse landscape. It also allowed for a much more intimate experience of the relationship between him and his son Atreus.
Look here, another.
So from my impressions, my first playthrough was the remastered PlayStation 5 edition of God of War, and I thoroughly enjoyed every moment of it. The battles and the fights were engrossing, challenging, and fun. The mechanics of unique bosses and optional bosses were rewarding to discover and to beat them. The world was massive, and it was beautiful. And the quick travel system kept the pace up, even when I was backtracking at times. I never felt really bogged down. In fact, many of the loading times were disguised with impactful cutscenes that drove the plot. In between encounters, the characters had conversations that ranged from amusing to, well, downright insightful. I often found the dialogue between the protagonist Kratos and his son Atreus was essential to the world building. It was essential to the lore, to the empathy the players built for the duo as the father and son. There were moments of frustration that I recognized as a dad, and other moments that I could see Atreus acting out. He was seeking attention, validation, and most importantly, he was seeking approval. There were other moments that the story became secondary to surviving the frantic, well-constructed combat scenarios that provided significant challenges. I found that I could keep trying, especially against the Valkyries, to get better. Or the easier option, to get more experience for additional skills and gear to survive. There were other times that I just got lost in the impeccable gameplay to include the narrative, the puzzles, the collectibles, and all the funny interactions between the protagonist and the duo antagonist. Atreus is the second most important character. I know I'm not saying it right. Other characters like Dwarven Blacksmith brothers were in there too. I have some spoilers kind of intermixed, but I'm trying not to say too much and spoil too much. This is aimed for the parents who want to know more about why the game excels and who it's aimed at.
Boy.
Yes, sir.
The gameplay of God of War is almost a typical fantasy RPG, except that it's executed wonderfully.
Okay, that's going in the journal.
I reviewed Rune 2 last year, which is roughly the same gameplay style with a different story in the same setting, and it was horrible to play comparatively. Combat in God of War is smooth, and on the higher difficulties can be challenging, but very rewarding. It starts off simple without much concern for gear or skill. The focus is more on timing and tempo. As players progress, the game gives them new abilities and new tests for players to compete against. While they progress, the skill trees give players options to build how they want to progress and build. But ultimately, Kratos is Kratos, and he's going to use his God-given abilities to wreak havoc when it's necessary. What's really nice about the gameplay is that there's changes of pace. Constant combat would just be fatiguing, so the game balances different tiers of fights with storytelling, world building, exploration, and, well, fun puzzles. Since the game is open world with linear missions, players are given an option on what to do in between advancing the story. These side quests provide rewards in the form of in-game bonuses for crafting materials and upgrades, and they also give out-of-game achievements to show off dedication. Suffice to say, although the game took me nearly 30 hours to beat, I only have 30% of it completed, and the average 100% run takes between 40 and 50 hours. Graphically, for the PlayStation 5 version of the game, I found it, well, beautiful and detailed. The environments were gorgeous and without any stuttering or clipping. The visuals of the combat flowed really smooth, with special abilities and actions having colorful and vibrant animations that were delicious visual cues for what was happening, especially important in the boss fights. The environment was impactful. This wasn't just background, but a living, breathing character giving a home to the story, a tapestry that the other characters wove in and through to tell their story.
Why don't you help me up there? I can get a better look.
By all reports, the PC version of the game runs exceptionally smooth, not just for a PlayStation port, but in general. On top of that, it looks amazing and supports several advanced options. I'm excited to play it on PC since many of the previous PS5 ports really didn't do that well.
Wait here. I will handle this.
The use of sound in God of War is exceptional. If visuals were a character, the sound is the storyteller. The background sets the scene and reinforces the moods required for that particular situation. Instead of being distracting, the music enhances the game flow while reinforcing the emotional context for what we're seeing on the screen at that time. Is it frustration, rage, fear, sadness, anger, and acceptance? They're all felt through the game's score. The sound effects throughout the game are also top tier. The ringing of the Dwarven Smith's hammer fades based on the distance from their camp, and sound is directional, allowing for meaningful audio cues for discovery, combat, and storytelling. I don't think I need to mention the voice acting. I can't do it justice. It's phenomenal. It's absolutely breathtaking.
That is not
You've
necessary.
taught me so much. Let me teach you something.
God of War is the whole storytelling package. The sound, the graphics, the gameplay, the narrative. They're all reinforced by the conversations which are given real weight and emotions like love and hatred and fear. And they're all real. They're also captivating. Speaking of storytelling, it's the hidden gem of God of War. Wait, did I just say that it's a hidden gem? When every aspect of this game is amazing, is there a way to really hide any one piece of it? Okay, let me explain this. For me, with games, I don't think of the narrative of the story last, but a lot of people who aren't gamers do. To them, games are not there for the story, but for the interaction, and worse, as a waste of time. But games to the quality of God of War are instant classics that can capture a generation's imagination. I think of them comparatively like the Song of Fire and Ice book, or Lord of the Rings, or movies like Star Wars, or Daniel Craig's James Bond run. Compared against Twilight or old school, the former examples of media are in a completely different category of books and movies. The same can be said for God of War and Fortnite. One example of this story is the struggles that Kratos goes through to tell Atreus what he was, to face his past and tell his son that he wants him to be better than Kratos himself is. It's not a story arc most would expect in a game, but God of War not only did it, but pulled it off masterfully. As a game, there were also a lot of little things that made it a lot better, such as the loading screens were greatly reduced through game mechanics and cutscenes that were paced extremely well. They weren't disruptive in the least. In fact, I found myself more engrossed in the story and never felt impatient to get to the next fight because I knew it was right around the corner. Overall, God of War is a brutal, harsh game that respects more mature players. It's also a game that has a beautiful story, and as a dad, I really felt both sides of the conversation, even the nonverbal cues. So do I think it's worth playing? Absolutely. Do I think it's one of the best stories I've ever played? Yeah. Red? It's pretty close. As a dad, this game's a solid 10 of 10 for the PS4 generation, and it's going to be hard to top for the PS5 and the PC. There are things that I could nitpick with the game. There's minor bugs, there's little things here and there, but to be honest, God of War is a fun game. It's mature, so make sure that it's age appropriate for who you're playing with, but there's a great way to have a conversation, talk about relationships, talk about history, and the lore and the theologies that were present in the past, because this game does explore real historical lores and real historical theologies. So with that, I'm Wes from Ridir Gaming. This was a really fun game. I thoroughly enjoyed everything about it. If you're interested, please do me a favor, hit like and subscribe. So let me know down in the comments if you're excited for God of War 2. I think that this game sets the stage extremely well for an exceptionally great God of War 2. This is Wes from Ridir Gaming. Do good, play hard, game on, and I'll see you next time.